New Boots, a short story. The narrator recounts a visit to a museum commemorating fatalities in Australian rules football. New Boots' brother Jono was among the Celtic martyrdoms of sport and recreation. A slightly framed ruck rover with a strong left punt, he was prematurely crushed to death in a zealous group hug after his team, the Panthers, won the under-19s for the first time since 1921. Not only had Jono 16 kicks and 3 handballs and was judged third best on the day, but his fiancée Sheila was watching on from the Morris Dibley stand and expecting their love child in a fortnight. It is the type of tragedy that constitutes a legend, is told with shaking heads at barbecues up and down the river towns, and makes it onto the back page of the low-browed Herald Sun. This explains New Boots' passion to chronicle events and celebrate all those great loose-fettered Antipodeans who gave their lives for the strange Baroque code of long-lost Irish roots that occupies a nation, or the game, as he calls it. He has established a museum in Eastern Reef, not far from where Toby Thudder Sparrow, the greatest of the Rovers, was born. He sits at the desk, now a slightly shrunken man, but with the look of the goal square in his eyes and his 47 senior games etched in the lineament of his face. He is a living encyclopedia, a boon of obscure knowledge, a rolling barrel of plump statistics, and still number 1 ticket holder for the Wombats, the club that saved his marriage and apprenticed him to a plumber back in the torrid windy days. His father, Reg, who played on the wing, whispered the team song in his ear at birth and took him to see Big Knuckles play his ton. Sadly, old Reg corroded all the chrome work of his nerve ends after Jono's demise and kicked the ball alone in the empty parklands by the riverside. But New Boots kept taking to the field, a ritual of bleak and beery Saturday afternoons, cans, car horns, trailing scarves, sticky mud pathways, cyclone fencing, crusty meat pies, uncooked saveloys, toothy girls in duffel coats, smelly urinals erected inside squares of canvas netting. They called him New Boots, he likes to relate, because his feet just kept growing, and the year he kicked 6 goals from the pocket in a final quarter burst, he was into size 16s. In his heyday, he bought a pair of new boots every second game, which meant that the home crowd got to see them all shining and crisp and bursting with full-length stoppers and the brassy smell of leather. They were ankle grabbers in those days, of course, and he had his share of quarters on the bench, busy strapping up with a team of trainers, just precautionary in case the groin played up again. But it was, as he says, all in the game, and the game has its ways and its wonders. He remembers witnessing Charlie Lopez, 6'6", unreachable in the clinches, rucking from the forward pocket, drifting through the air, riding on the shoulders of Percy Eli, eyes on the ball, and all of a sudden being struck by lightning, just as Gizmo Hudson scooped up the slops and headed home in a dashing 6-pointer steal. He explains that in the circumstances, Charlie was probably the most skyward of them all. What a leap! Man like that, he says, never balked at a bruise. He would have played with his bloody neck in a traction. I watched the Corangamite forward little Andy Hopkins kick 3 goals with a broken leg. You don't see dedication like that anymore. Charlie must have jumped 5 feet, so with his head up there in the clouds, plus 6'6", he was a certain target, zapped by a massive voltage just then lingering in the atmospherics above the moistened ground. He tapped it down too, says the Boots, and won a free for interference. But of course he couldn't take the kick. Exhibitions abound. Trophies and stale records, infamous worm burners, false teeth, spare limbs of wasted heroes, medallions and beer pots, shoestrings and tiny parcels of scuffed turf, great grabs, banners, audio files of Harry Beitzel saying "in the van," Towering bursts, samples of Carl Dietrich's underwear, the hymn book of Jerry Ablett Sr., spectacular instances of the flick pass, wall-to-wall and amply arranged. The rooms are bristling with colourful memorabilia. His oldest and most prized exhibition is the ponytail of star Chinese recruit Frank Chang, halfback Frank, as he was known, who was killed in race riots 8 minutes into time on in the third quarter of a practice game at Bangham Bridges. Now I'm as multicultural as the next man, says the Boots, motioning to the chop suey in the takeaway menu on the fridge. But what does a Chinaman know about zone defence? He points out, in fact, that only 8 goals 16 have ever been kicked by players of Asian extraction in all the decades of the league, and then declares his fondness for the season of 52 when the White Australia policy was in force. Among the cups and silver-plated lists, the feats of brave doing and muscular camaraderie, he has a special place for such memories, and several books on the subject too. No multi-premiership winning coach was ever of Asian extraction, he adds. Lester Smith looked Asian, but that was Cornish blood. The Corns are like that. Midday on Sundays is when his mates gather round, the bottle tops flip and, tongue loosened by an ale or three, New Boots puts his feet on the poof and displays true acumen. He calls himself a stylist. He has chronicled in particular the Darling Junction versus Dorton mine disaster, where the game almost lost a pool of talent unseen since the Great Depression. He points to a picture on the wall. The whole damn highway end of the ground gave way, he explains. It was just 6 minutes into the second half. The Junction surged into their forward line when suddenly, crash, the earth just opened and swallowed them whole. There had been 5 unfavourable engineer reports, but the evil mining magnates didn't listen. In their greed for zinc and licks of tungsten, they kept drilling right under the southern end of the Darling Junction Oval. He then lists the victims: Chicken Taylor, Stimpy Robinson, Handy Hammond, Gordon Miller, Ferret Long with a 25 possession average over 3 seasons, Angus Chappelli, Terry the Hulk Ridgway, Achilles Mackenzie, and not forgetting Owen Kreutz, his first game, umpiring near the point post. New Boots claims all of these as a special kin. The Chappelli family, in fact, he goes on, were tempted by soccer up until the time of the inquest, but had since visited the museum on a regular basis for a winsome reflection of the sun that might have been. What a conversion rate, says the Boots, shaking his head. Who knows? He might have been another Gary Bamblett. The Robinsons had frequented too and donated a jockstrap, although they were against the game from the first and were always more inclined to volleyball or 10-pin bowling, ostensibly safer pastimes. Jono was heading in that direction once, said New Boots, now staring into space, but Dad wouldn't have it. As for himself, he had once trifled with table tennis. This was in the depleted days following the second knee reconstruction, but it never really took hold. They're cunning though, the Asians, he admitted. That little ball. Perhaps his most cherished item lies in the gilded cupboard with woolen flanks of knitted scarves and streamers, a rare prize from when Royce Rolls dominated the half-forward paddocks and the drop kick could still be seen. He takes you over, edges up and glistens like the holy grail of grown men who love nothing more than to spend their weekends scrambling for an inflated bladder, somehow symbolic of the summum bonum. He reveals it slowly. The timekeeper's horn that saved the day. It was, he says, his eyes alight. 29 minutes down and Tutto stabbed past a Pongo farmer, looking like a cert. Then, he says, I shrugged the tackle, sold the dummy, hooked it over my shoulder with Mickey Conway on his lonesome in the square. Talk about excitement. That, he then explains, was when the siren sounded. And as the ball rolled out of bounds, the Wombats won by a point in a nail-biter that had seesawed since the bounce. Obviously polished and kept with strident care, New Boots holds the horn in his burly hand and makes the siren noise with one finger on his nostril. Nah. People leapt from their cars on the hill. The stand erupted. Mascots scattered down the race. Ugly women in flak jackets and overcoats leapt up and down on the spot. Important people collected on the winnings. There is, it seems, always one outing that sticks in the minds of men such as these, and for New Boots, this is it. We only lost 5th spot on percentage, you know, he remembered wistfully. The gang tackle hadn't been perfected. Fans of the losing side dragged the timekeeper from his box and throttled him. It was an incident that led to the installation of protective bars on the windows of timekeeper boxes at all home and away games thereafter, and unofficially many timekeepers began to carry firearms and employ bodyguards for the big games. Boots claims to have chronicled every fatality since records started in 1882. There was Milo Kahuni, who died in a screamer when Melville Cave seniors met Doondalupa in the playoff for the Murray Trussell Motors pre-season cup. And Hawthorn's Warren Tolley popped a bad aorta taking a one-hander against the Newcastle Possums and later died of complications. The fullback for the Barrymore Porkers, Frosty Dale, collided with the loose man in a sickening incident that left his mother June with the decision to turn off life support in the weeks that followed. A utility player for Coorawabba named Sammy Turner collapsed when a sudden cramp spread from his calf muscle to his brain. Over the exhibitions in red light lettering but not plugged in is a sign saying, "Lest we forget." On the wall, defined by a teak wood frame, are signed medical records, the testamenta of human frailty. The Boots then describes how a stoned-out maniac drove a jeep onto the field during the last quarter of the Ballarat-New Forest clash in 1968, mowing down agile Arnold Lusko, the first pick in the draft, and how Eddie Fanzoni was skewed on the behind post in a freak misadventure in the dying minutes of the Lower Murray League second semi-final in the memorable year of 1957. The mathematics of such events has not escaped his attention. There are 18 players aside, he explains, plus the interchange, and 4 quarters of 25 minutes, which all amounts to an entirely generous arena for tragedy. The ground staff at Heretic River Reserve killed 3 junior players and hospitalised another 7 in a serious herbicide miscalculation, he explains casually, pointing to an old galvanised poison sprayer on exhibit in the corner. He then explains that Ken Staunton, back pocket for Bixley Downs, died of the purple cardiacs at training, and that half of the Dimboola under-16s died of the diarrheas after a pre-season sausage sizzle back in 1951. The Richhaven full forward, Lenny Blockett, died of excitement as he walked in to kick his 100 in the season of 63. And then there was the case of Lance Grills, a notorious philanderer, who was murdered in a crime of passion at the centre bounce when a jilted lover ran onto the field wielding a carving knife. It took most of both teams, the umpires and the training staff, to finally subdue her. This preoccupation with mortality has made the Boots slightly philosophical. He is an astute observer of human foibles. The game takes its share of brave men. It brings out the best and the worst in players and pundits both. In the River Towns, the footy season is marked by an earnest concentration. There is little else to talk about. Whole families stake their well-being on the final scores. Communities shrink or swell according to the fortunes of their team. There are matters of honour and matters of tradition. The coach of Lake Wobatide, Gil Farine, says the Boots, was found murdered in the trainer's box several hours after a 190-point thrashing from the visitors from Whiskey River. Old rivals, he explains. There was also fullback Trent Nobley killed by an unidentified elbow in the famous Elegant Ridge Ethelberry grudge match in 1966. And who can forget the great Reggie Dixon, he muses, who was trampled to death by embittered fans after a controversial draw with California Gully. He turns to another display and with a hint of whimsy in his voice mentions Ace Stevens, centreman for Garnapungamil Reserves, who just fell over and never got up again. New Boots has a monument for them all. He shows you the death certificates preserved in glass cases under special lighting. He shows you the coroner's reports. He shows you pictures of their widows and their girlfriends, their mums and their little brothers, their sons, their cars, their houses and backyards, and sometimes their dogs and daughters. The memorial to Jono comes last. He takes his place with such as Nasty Coleman, who died in a level crossing incident on his way to the best and fairest, unaware that he was equal runner-up. Or Torpedo Smith, who was electrocuted in the showers and the rub-down after the first semi back in '76. And then there's the Boomageechee brothers, Austin and Chris, who accidentally shot each other in a tragedy yet to be explained, and Tubby Turpy, who drowned at the bottom of a melee in the wettest opening round of home and away games in 30 years. It is not, as the Boots is inclined to say, a game for sissies. The sheer emotion is enough. It crackles from the radio live and crossing to all the other grounds. It is manifestly vital to the Boots to know that Jono didn't die in vain. We have a lot of Catholics in the game, you know, he says, pointing over to a rosary hanging from the cup of 59. Dad's agnostic, but I've made a prayer or two, I can tell you. The sunlight had stained his face over the years, but there was no mistaking a furrow of sincerity and a caring heart. The flag perhaps was consolation enough. People said the Panthers were just a bunch of limp-wristed poofters, he says, matter-of-factly. But Jono did him proud. He had picked up most of his kicks, Boots explains, playing the loose man in the centre corridor, 3 opponents in 3 quarters. The tricky handball out of trouble was his speciality, a poet and a playmaker. The scouts had seen him in the match at Restless Pleasure, and as everyone agreed, a bit of gym work could have made of him a champion. Good skills, right attitude, excellent work ethic, tenacity, a team player, one of the blokes. He is, nevertheless, just a boy in his photograph, his thighs thin and his spotty eyes knowing that 100 minutes of celebrated application that sends men like the Boots to the record books to check the scores again and again. There was this character playing for the Manangatang Tigers named Mario Lepetrozzini, says the Boots. A Western Oriental gentleman, but a decent player all the same. He was bitten by a brown snake of all things, near the goal post at the southern end, and died of frothy seizures before his teammates even noticed. He shows you a photo of the ambulance arriving and a close-up of the puncture wound. Such events perhaps make Jono's fate seem slightly less unkind. The museum was perhaps a testament to savage destiny, the fickle hand of sport, the uncertain bounce of the odd-shaped ball, which is itself an allegory of life's relentless twists and turns and refusal to be constant. Busloads of fans arrive before going on to the New Vic Hotel for parmesanas and bingo. New Boots greets them in the car park and makes a joke about the weather. He doesn't even mention Jono at the beginning, but lets the fact that he had lost a brother to the game dawn on his visitors slowly, as if to authenticate his expertise. There is really no need. His knowledge is prodigious. Every square inch is a story. He leads you past the Coke machine near the door to the back room. Even this spikes his memory. There was a bloke who played for the Western League named Dewey Carruthers, he begins, who was rubbed out for 3 weeks, spitting I think it was, and was killed in the dressing rooms when the drink machine exploded.